Back in 1977, a film did something incredible. It didn't just entertain us, it planted this huge cosmic question in our minds that's been lingering for almost 50 years. Today, we're going to trace a line from that cinematic masterpiece all the way to a new chapter that promises some answers. And get this, that's a direct promise from Emily Blunt, the star of Steven Spielberg's new film, Disclosure Day. So, after nearly half a century, the story that started with Close Encounters of the Third Kind is finally getting a follow-up. And with it, we might actually get some answers. To really understand where we're going, we first have to go back, right? So let's revisit that spectacle, that sense of wonder, and, the human drama of 1977 that made Spielberg's original film an absolute classic. The real power of Close Encounters is in its incredible visual language. It was never just a movie about aliens. It was a film about how we, as human beings, react to something that's truly, completely incomprehensible. Spielberg is an absolute master at playing with our emotions, and in the best way possible. Just think about that first encounter with Roy Neary in his truck. The light from above is terrifying, sure, but it also has this almost religious quality to it, like a divine revelation. And then, as things start to float weightlessly, there's this sense of unsettling magic. It's just this perfect cocktail of emotions, all served up in one unforgettable scene. And this is where Spielberg is just brilliant. He captures two totally different reactions to the unknown. For the little kid, Barry Giller, seeing the lights is pure joy, pure enthusiasm. But for his mom, Jillian, that same wonder is all tangled up with a very real, primal fear for her child's safety. But all that awe, wow, it came at a price. For Roy Neary, his quest turned into an obsession. It drove him to sculpt mountains out of his mashed potatoes, lose his job, and in the end, to actually abandon his family. It's this really dark undercurrent to all the spectacle. Spielberg himself said years later that after he became a dad, he had real trouble with Roy's choice to leave. It just adds this whole other layer of sadness to all that cosmic wonder. Okay, but here's where the story takes a really fascinating turn. This absolutely awe-inspiring cinematic vision, it wasn't just pulled out of thin air. No, it was actually grounded in decades of real-world research, real accounts, and a surprisingly systematic attempt to understand the unknown. I love how Spielberg himself framed it. He called the film science speculation. He wasn't trying to make a documentary, not at all, but he was deeply inspired by the very real experiences of people he talked to, people who had genuinely looked up at the sky and seen something they just could not explain. He built his fiction on a foundation of fact. And the key figure connecting Spielberg's fiction to those facts was Dr. J. Allen Hynek. Now, he was an astronomer who originally worked for the U.S. Air Force on Project Blue Book, basically to debunk UFO sightings. But over time, Hynek became convinced there was a real, unexplained phenomenon that needed serious scientific study. He even ended up as a technical consultant on the film, and he has a little cameo in it too. And the film's title? It wasn't just some catchy movie tagline. It's a direct quote from Dr. Hynek's own research. A specific classification. He defined a close encounter of the third kind with scientific precision. He even used the word animated to keep the door open for encountering robots or other constructs, not just living beings. And this is that system. This is what Hynek created to try and bring some scientific order to a field that was, let's be honest, often dismissed as fantasy. He categorized sightings from simple lights in the sky all the way up to the three kinds of close encounters. It's this scientific framework that gave Spielberg's story such a powerful feeling of authenticity. So, Hynek and Spielberg offered this sense of clarity back in the 70s. But what about the modern search for answers? Well, the reality today is far more blurry. The challenges facing today's UAP researchers are vastly different and, in a lot of ways, way more complex. Think about it for a second. In Close Encounters, we see the mothership in all its glory, this massive, detailed mechanical sunrise just filling the whole screen. But in the real world of UAP research, what do scientists usually have to work with? The blurry dot. Yeah, a really common characteristic of modern UAP reports is low observability, which is just a fancy way of saying it's incredibly hard to get a sharp, clear picture. And maybe the biggest hurdle isn't the technology. It's us. As a recent guide for astronomers points out, our brains interpret signals, they don't just record them like a camera. Our senses are uncalibrated, which makes eyewitness testimony notoriously difficult to rely on. It's a problem that goes way, way back to ancient philosophy. Researchers sometimes compare it to Plato's allegory of the cave. where prisoners mistake shadows on a wall for the real thing? Modern scientists looking at UAP data are kind of in the same boat. Are they seeing the phenomenon itself, or just a distorted shadow of it? So yeah, the deck is really stacked against researchers. The events are unpredictable, the data is often poor quality, and now there's a whole new threat: AI-powered deep fake technology, which makes it easier than ever to create convincing hoaxes and just muddy the waters even more. Which, brings us right back to where we started. In a world of blurry data and deepfakes, maybe it's fitting that we turn back to a storyteller, to art, to help us keep the conversation going. See, this isn't just about two movies. It's about a conversation that's been evolving for almost 50 years. Close Encounters asked the big questions back in '77. For all the decades since, scientists and the public have wrestled with them. Now, in 2026, Disclosure Day is set to pick up that thread and carry the whole dialogue forward. And from what we can tell, the new film is going to tap right into those same deeply human themes. Emily Blunt says her character has this sense that she doesn't belong. That sounds a lot like Roy Neary, doesn't it? That same searching, that same feeling of being pulled towards something bigger, that profound sense of cosmic longing. So we've gone on quite a journey here, right? From the science speculation of Spielberg's masterpiece, through the structured science of Dr. Hynek, all the way to the frustratingly blurry data of modern UAP research. And through all of it, one thing has stayed the same: our unstoppable drive to figure out our place in the universe. Which leaves us with one final, kind of mind-bending thought. For almost 50 years, one of our most powerful explorations of this cosmic question hasn't come from a lab, but from a film director. So, if art is where we keep finding our most compelling questions, and maybe even our answers about the unknown, what does that really tell us about the nature of our reality?